Thank you. Thanks a lot. So thank you, everyone. So first, congratulations. You decided to go for the economics talk today. I hope you will still like it. So yeah, my name is Romain. I've been working for a few years on animal welfare economics. I'm not here to give you a full history of animal welfare economics, but let's say there is a new wave of animal welfare economics over the past decade. I'm one of the actors in this field. And today I wanted to give you like a small overview about recent developments in this field on how we can try to value animal welfare. So I was asked whether there are like requirements to attend the talk. I said no. I tried to put no equations in it. Still, I mean, if you have questions, more technical questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards, I mean, in the afternoon. So, as you know, and maybe better than I do, we observe today kind of a paradox. On the one side, we have like animal welfare that is going like in a very, very bad state, and it's worsening year after year. At a global level. In my view, there are two main drivers for this worsening of animal welfare globally. The rise in demand for animal-based proteins, which leads to more animals being killed, but more importantly, I think, intensification of practices, farming practices, both for terrestrial animals and for fish. Okay, there is also a rapid decline in wild animals. Wild animals, like in terms of population, but also in terms of welfare, because when you have a rapid decline, then you also have like very bad welfare at rapid pace. So, but on the other side, like the demand for improving animal welfare, at least in surveys and polls, is higher than ever. So in the EU, we have like now, it's been like for 10 years already that like 9 out of 10 people in Europe say we should protect animal welfare. So I think you know kind of those figures. Then the question is why nothing is happening. So I think it's the big question a lot of economists have been interested in, not only economists, but in our fields also. And actually one of the questions is, okay, I mean, animal welfare is a big challenge, but maybe it's not bigger than climate change, okay? And they've been successful in climate change, you know, in having something. I'm not saying that they've solved the issue, but still they have something. They have like international agreements. They're capable of quantifying CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on, and they have plans to reduce that. So of course, I mean, climate change will impact everyone. So maybe humans are more selfish, so we have something to do. But I think one reason why they have become very successful is that they're capable of quantifying and having public policy tools to discuss those questions. So here, I think one of the way to see the current literature is to say, what can we do? Can we do something similar for animal welfare? So we know that diverging interests for humans, non-human animals, and also like within humans, within other species, also there are trade-offs between different interests. So how can we design tools for policy making that help us take those interests into account? So the big question, I'm going to give you a few elements of answer today, is how can we get closer to equal consideration of equal interests by developing methods in economics to value the welfare of non-human animals. So the first question is, what interests should we consider? So first, maybe a disclaimer. Here in economics, we're only concerned with cases where there are trade-offs. Okay, so those are cases where there are winners, there are losers. For instance, you have a new policy, and of course we're interested in those like situations. Why? Because if there are only winners to a policy, or only losers to a policy, you don't maybe need economists, you don't need fancy works to tell you what you should do. But I think most of the issues we are interested here today at this conference is concerns the cases where you have trade-offs between different peoples and also different species. So for instance, eating meat increases human welfare, okay, at the expense of the animals. I think it's kind of straightforward. Of course, here what we want to say is whether the increase in human welfare driven by meat consumption outweighs or not the decrease in animal welfare that's induced by that. Other example, maybe where I try to think about one example where the animals would be winning and the humans would be losing. It's maybe we spent money to improve the welfare of animals in some cases, like creating parks or recreational areas in cities for animals like dogs. It costs money for humans and so on, but still we're improving their welfare. So, okay, imagine we consider cases where we are interested in trade-offs, and what are the interests, okay, we want to trade off here. So also here, it's also a difficult question, so I try to narrow down the scope of the talk as well. First, let's say that not all interests are worth investigating or considering when you look at trade-offs. So here I take like the famous case for humans where basically when you're a policymaker, you're not taking into account racist preferences when you design a policy, okay? You're not saying, hey, having like everyone, different ethnic groups in one school is bad because there are like a lot of racist people here. So maybe it's worth, there are also similar questions when it comes to animals. For instance, there are people who dislike some animals. Should we take into account their preferences or not? So those are like open questions. Then there are also, let's say that even if we agree on what types of interests we should consider, we know that different species might have different interests. Okay, for instance, there are species which have which put high value on social interactions, some other not, and so on. So here we are also trying to evaluate interests of individuals who have like very different interests. Last, I've heard you talk about that a bit yesterday. I want to say that we want to focus here on, we will focus here on welfare. Okay, why? So very often I have this question about fundamental rights. So I don't say that animals don't have fundamental rights, same for humans. But the thing is that if an animal has a fundamental right, then there is no trade-off. Okay? If an animal has the fundamental right to live and not being killed, then there is no trade-off to talk about when it comes to meat consumption. End of the debate. Somehow it's kind of economists don't work on abortion. Okay? We don't say, hey, there is a trade-off between welfare of the pregnant woman and the child and so on. Okay? We just say, okay, there is a fundamental right for abortion up to this date, but rather it's a political debate. So here we will only enter the subsequent discussion is conditional on the fact that there is not a fundamental right at stake. What can we do in terms of trade-offs? So what we want to do, what I'm really convinced about with years of working also with policymakers is that we need guidelines to document how actions, like policies, can impact individuals, including animals, and what we should do to give everyone equal consideration. I think something very different from maybe other talks you'll see or other metrics is that I'm convinced we need metrics that are operational, that can be used easily by policymakers tomorrow. So we don't want to create new metrics out of nothing, okay, that quantify welfare in a way that policymakers cannot use. Okay, if I give you at the end of the day, this policy is going to create 10 chicken welfare points standardized in intensive farm, for instance, well, you go to the policymaker with that and it's useless. So we are really convinced that we need to take the existing framework of decision-making for policies and to include animal welfare in that in the way that's compatible with what they've been doing for humans. So that's exactly what they've done with greenhouse gases emissions. We now quantify greenhouse gases emissions. There is a price, social price for greenhouse gases emissions, and then we just you just gave that to policymakers, and now they're able to to quantify when you eat a product or food, or when you produce something. There is a production price, but there is also a price associated with carbon or greenhouse gas emissions. So what we want is to do really something like that. So how to quantify animal welfare? It's a long road, and I think we are not yet there, but I try to give you a few insights about what we've done in the field. So first, I would start by saying that it's already difficult for humans to talk about welfare and to quantify welfare. There have been huge decades of debates about whether we can make what we call interpersonal welfare comparisons, like between two humans. But basically, that's how we do that now. Imagine, I know you like both apples and bananas, but so when I give you the choice, you go like for apples. But what you want to do is to quantify how much, in terms of intensity, you prefer apples compared to banana. So what I will do is that I will increase the number of bananas here in my basket up to the point where you tell me, hey, now I prefer the bananas, like the 10 bananas over 1 apple, or the point where you are indifferent. So, of course, we could measure everything in terms of bananas. I would be like a promoter of that, but somehow we decided that we can use money instead. Why? Because money is something with all value, while there might be like very heterogeneous preferences about bananas. So basically, we ask you how much you're willing to pay for this apple, and the higher you're ready to pay, then the more the welfare you get from the apple. Okay, so basically that's how we do that for humans. How much what we call the willingness to pay, how much a human is willing to pay to get to something. So imagine here, small example. We both have the same amount of money. I won't talk about this assumption, but that's a key assumption. I'm ready to pay up to 5 euros for that apple. You're ready to pay up to 8 euros. So here it means that giving you the apple is better than giving me the apple, because we have the same budget constraint, but you're ready to sacrifice more for that apple. Okay, so first it's difficult for humans. So there have been huge debate on, so here we have a big warning why it's animal welfare economics, it's a difficult task is that all those criticisms we have for humans about how we compare welfare, we will also have them when it comes to animal welfare, but we will add another layer of complexity. So that's why sometimes it's very difficult to convince colleagues who are already skeptical at this stage to compare the willingness to pay for humans. So when it comes to animals, so we know animals are capable of making choices, so we could do the same thing as before, trying to find the bananas, the apples, and then to look at intensity of preferences among animals. So imagine you bought like a huge tree, cat tree, and you have like those boxes on the ground, and like 90% chance that your cat is going on the boxes and on the cat tree. So let's say we could take the boxes as as money units. We could and there are works in animal welfare sciences that look at choices like that to elicit preferences of animals. However, at some point we want to investigate very complex choices which are very abstract, and we cannot ask directly animals what they would do in those situations. Okay, here I thought about a small example. You cannot ask your cat who's living in an apartment now how many boxes he or she would be ready to give up. Sorry, for mistake. To give up to get to get access to a house with outdoor access. Okay, why? Because the question is not understandable for the cat. So that's an easy example. But when you have much more complex questions, for instance, you have a broiler in a cage in intensive farming, okay? You cannot really ask the broiler how much food it's ready to give away to get free range farming, and that at the global level. So I think here we somehow face a wall, and we cannot directly replicate what we've done with humans. And at some point, we need to rely on humans, okay, to quantify the welfare of animals. Or at least, what we can try to do is to put ourselves in the shoes of the animal and try to think, okay, what would the animal choose in this particular matter, or what would be in its best interest. Very small parenthesis. We also have these types of situations for humans when it comes to children. Okay, when children are not capable of expressing their preferences, what we do is that we ask the parents. So it's not unique, but I'm trying to convince my colleagues that it's not unique for humans, so we should also maybe accept that for animals. Okay. So what do we want to capture? Let's imagine, okay, this is here you have like the welfare of the animal over the years, starting from birth to death. We know that at some points in the animal's life there will be positive welfare, and at other points there will be negative welfare. And what we want to do is to capture like those variations at different moments, which is already a difficult task. I will not present that today, but there are even more complex questions when the lifespan of the animal can change, okay, because you need to compare in some cases, welfare, be it positive or negative, with non-existence in other cases. I've worked on it with some colleagues, but it's beyond today's talk. So we want you to have this gray curve here and try to understand the welfare variations and to express that at the end of the day in monetary units. Sorry. I think, okay. Don't know what happened. Okay. So let's say there are two main approaches that have been proposed so far to get monetary units for the welfare of the animal. So I think the most common approach in economics, I mean, now maybe for 40, 50 years, it's what we can call the altruistic or indirect approach. Saying, okay, we cannot have directly the cat saying how much money it would want to give up to get outdoor access. So what we can do is to ask the pet owner how much the pet owner is willing to give away, okay? And if the owner, likes his cat, then but what we call transitivity, okay, we should have something that correlates with the welfare of the cat. So okay, here you have me, like imagine with a hen, I was looking for opportunity to put this picture for years now, so here it is. So here, imagine you care about chicken's welfare or hen's welfare. Then I ask you as human how much you're willing to pay, okay, to prevent a cage farming for the chicken or the hen. And because you're altruistic, okay, I get a kind of an indirect measure of variations of the welfare of the chicken. Okay, so and now I think it's kind of a very popular approach in agricultural economics. Maybe it's better than nothing. There are discussions about that. Personally, I really dislike this approach, but I understand the pros for that. So the pros is that, okay, you directly express something in welfare change in monetary units compared to that you can compare it with other interests. So for instance, we've been also working, we had discussions with the USDA, so the US Agency for Food and food stuff. And when you read the decisions when it comes to animal welfare, they use this type of measures, okay, especially for cage farming, outdoor access, and so on. So it's very popular for them because they can integrate that quite easily in their existing framework. So what we don't like in that is that first, it's not sure we're all altruistic toward the animals. Okay, maybe there are animals we dislike. Also, maybe we are not as altruistic, okay, towards the animal that the animal itself would be, okay, for himself. For instance, I think maybe you care more about your own welfare than someone you don't know on the street who would be asking about his willingness to pay to help you, basically. So next, the big question is whether we have good knowledge about what the animal is experiencing. So if you ask lay people about their willingness to pay to help animal, maybe here we are, they're misguided, and so on. And last, we know there are many behavioral biases when you ask humans about their willingness to pay, not only for animal welfare, but that's an even bigger problem for animal welfare. Just to tell you, in one of my work, I had French people reporting their willingness to pay to help animals, and they were ready to pay almost about the same thing to help the end of dolphins, in like dolphin shows. Maybe there were like 12 or 15 of them in France. Maybe it was about the same amount of money they were ready to pay to end cage farming in France. Okay, so this is about what we call scope neglect. The number of animals don't really impact that. So I think there are many issues with that. It's very popular, but we try to go beyond. So more recently, a few works have developed what I would call the direct approach. So trying to get as close as possible to what the animal would choose or what would be best for the animal. So here, there are a lot of different methods, but if I had to summarize a bit, the general pattern would be, okay, we try to capture what matters for animal welfare, maybe asking for experts, or there have been like frameworks developed about that. Here is the 5-domain framework. Then we go and we ask experts to assess animal welfare on these aspects. And here, so it's a picture from, by the way, from a sanctuary in France, Gouin, a very nice place. And last, we can, based on the two previous steps, we try to construct a score of animal welfare. So once again, many people have been doing that, maybe not in economics, but what we want to do again here in economics is to make it such that we can directly use it in existing frameworks for policymaking. So pros is that we try to value animal welfare independently of our preferences as humans. I mean, as much as possible. I'm not sure we can completely do that. We ask experts possibly, and they may have better understanding the welfare of animals. The issue, of course, is that you're an expert, maybe you know better about animal welfare, but maybe you have specific values and views about animals. So there is always a trade-off between knowledge and values. The cons is that, of course, the welfare scores are not immediately comparable with other welfare measures. Okay, like here, for instance, if I stop here telling you we construct a score of animal welfare, the last step, okay, is how to transform that into monetary units. I will come to that. So I'm going to talk about 4 approaches that have been developed and I think have been very interesting over the past few years. The first approach was Brute and Stinge. So what the author proposed in his paper is a thought experiment. I wouldn't put too much weight or credibility on the numbers that you get from that. I think the authors also recognize that himself, but I think it's extremely interesting in the way about thinking about the problem. So let me illustrate that. So imagine you imagine this is the life of an animal here, also from Guangguan, and imagine that you are offered a choice and you can take a pill. And this pill, during your sleep, will make you experience the entire life of the animal. Okay. So basically, you will experience all the welfare experiences of the animal during its life, but when you wake up, there will be no trauma or whatever, you won't remember it. And the question that Stinge asks is how much you're willing to pay for taking the pill, or like negative values for not taking the pills. So it's a way of thinking about the problem as, okay, the more I'm ready to pay, the bigger I think the welfare of the animal here is. And here it's not about altruistic preferences because you will experience the welfare of the animal. Okay, so I think it gives very good clues about how to think about the problem. And if you have negative values, it means that you want to avoid this life. So maybe we're also able to capture lives that are not worth living and even that are worth avoiding. So here, good points. You directly get monetary values. You capture the interest of the animals, but here it depends on lay people views on the matter, and it's highly hypothetical. But I think still it was a very good work for a thought experiment. Then there's been another work proposed by 2 American folk, Kevin and Jonathan, and what they said is the following. They used a model for climate change that we reuse to quantify the impact of climate change. They say, okay, we take these specific welfare functions for humans in these models, so we don't go and assess the welfare of humans. We assume they are following this type of function. What we can do is just to put on this function where the animals are. So they did that, and they said, okay, the animals, average welfare for animals is very bad, so they're about here on the scale. Then, because we're able to transform this into monetary units for humans, we can do something similar for animals. So 2 points here, 2 difficulties. One of them is to define where, so there are 3 issues. One is to define where your point is here, on the curve. Then, of course, the question is whether animals have the same type of welfare function as we do as humans is very unlikely, I think. I don't know for you, but if you take a point of 1 for human, it means that you have 2,000 euros per year, about that, 2.5. But I think that if you invest 2,500 euros for your cat per year, I mean, your cat will have maximal welfare, which is not the case for humans, for instance. So there are discussions like that. So what we need to do is to transform, to weight somehow the welfare unit we will have for animals, or the monetary units, into human monetary units. So it's something I will come back later, but that's an issue for all the papers I'm going to present. So goods is that now we have a good connection, between human and animal welfare. Animals' interests are also captured directly, but here animal welfare is not well defined. They just put it here on the line without discussing it. And of course, I don't say it's bad, it's first step. And of course, you have heterogeneity of situations. There is not a single, like broiler in the world that's experiencing the same conditions. There are different farming systems. And even within the farming systems, there are like the very different living conditions. Yeah, so maybe that's the biggest challenges. So then, more recently, so one of my work, now a joint work with Nicolas, so two published work also, we made another step, I think, forward. What we did here is that we considered the model of the 5 freedoms, which is, maybe you're familiar with that, it's a model for used by the World Organization for Animal Health, developed in the UK in the 60s, that says that animal welfare is, we can evaluate animal welfare based on 5 freedoms. So free from hunger, extra, free from fear, distress, free from heat stress, free from injury, pain, and so on, and free to express natural patterns of behavior, whatever normal patterns of behavior means. What I propose in this first work is to say, okay, let's construct a scale for those 5 freedoms. Let's look at the number of violation points of those freedoms that the animal is experiencing, and this is what you have here. Okay, like from 0 to 4, and then let's compute the total number of violation points the animal is experiencing, and we end up with a total number of violation points. And last, to construct a welfare measure, what I said is, okay, there is a threshold above which we consider that the life of the animal is not worth living anymore, so it becomes equivalent to death. So here we have negative values that shows, states that are worse than death. So at the top here you have equal to 1, you have your cat at home, well fed, that you love, and so on. And here you have, the worst situation I thought about for animals is maybe animals that are transported, and they are left to die in trucks or huge cargoes with extreme heat, suffering, and so on. Okay. So what's one important property of this scale is that the 0 point is equivalent to non-existence or death, and the maximum is 1. And it mimics here what we do for humans, which is what we call QALYs, quality adjusted life years. So 1 QALY is equal to 1 year in perfect health for a human. So here a score of 1 means 1 year in perfect, without any violations of freedom for the animals. And you see here, we're starting to replicate the same properties for the tools we have for humans to animals, using the same scaling system. So here we're using kind of the same utility welfare functions. Here we try to do the same, but this is exactly what's used for humans in terms of properties for benefit cost analysis. So here we're trying to get closer to existing models of animal welfare, try to reproduce the properties I told you for human welfare scores. But still there are arbitrariness. For instance, how do we create the scale? And maybe you would agree with me that going from no violation to a mild violation of your welfare is very different from going to severe to very severe violation of your welfare. So here it was like one of the issues we faced. And one of the biggest issues, and now I'm focusing a lot on that, is that it was limited to negative welfare. I think it's very bad to have tools that limit themselves to negative welfare. We should completely go for positive welfare for various reasons. One of the creators of the 5 domains framework, the 2 co-authors, Beaulieu and gosh, I forgot the name of the big one. Sorry, the biggest name. Anyway, sorry for that. If he watch this video one day. So what they wrote once is that the issue with the 5 freedom is that at best we have animals that they have no violation of their welfare, of their rights somehow. Okay, so at best we would have like intensive farming where animals don't suffer from violations, but maybe that's not the life we want for the animals. Okay. When I teach, usually I take this example. Imagine you're going on holidays, and you have to leave me your dog. I will tell you, oh, sure, I will take your dog. I can guarantee there will be no issue of hunger, no issue of fear, no issue of heat stress, no issue of pain, no issue with expressing natural, normal patterns of behavior. The question is whether you want to give me your dog for your holidays. Doesn't look too exciting. So maybe you want the dog to have fun and so on. So I think it's very important in the long run to value also positive experiences. Okay, great. So Then I think the latest work we have on the topic, so trying to improve step by step, is this one, which is called one of the biggest projects, AQuali, animal qualities. So as you see from the name, quality is what we use for humans for years in perfect health. Here we just add animal qualities to try to really replicate as closely as possible what they've done for humans to convince policymakers. So here we use the 5 domain frameworks. I don't have time to explain, but it includes positive and negative experiences. Then we ask experts in animal welfare to determine between several, we have like many different situations, and we ask experts to determine what they think is best for the animal. So we make the welfare of the animal vary across several dimensions. But interestingly, also we make the life of the animal welfare vary in number of years. Okay, so we capture here really non-existence. So we obtain scores like that, which have very nice properties. For instance, here still 1 point, which means 1 year in perfect welfare. But we can also express here the worst possible welfare, kind of as number of years that you should sacrifice in perfect welfare that you should sacrifice to avoid this state. So for instance, here minus 1.5 means that we would be ready to sacrifice 1.5 year in perfect welfare to avoid 1 year in the worst possible welfare. So somehow here we're capturing like intensity with a number of lives also, but the quality of your lives. So which is exactly what they've been doing for humans, for instance, when they try to decide whether they should reimburse some medicines or not. Exactly, it's what they do. So here I think we're getting closer to having something anchored to up-to-date models for animal welfare. We have similar scores for and properties for scores with humans, but still here we will need somehow something to weight that. Okay, because we are able for humans to express that in monetary units. We know how to price 1 year of life for human. Okay, but the question is how we can do the same for the animals. So today, I think it's one of the biggest challenges. So the first question was how to quantify welfare, and the second question is how to compare welfare scores across species. So here it's I think there is much more work to be done, but let's see. So we're interested in those variations. Now imagine we obtain welfare scores that are comparable across species. How to make them comparable across species. So if you're familiar with rethink priorities and Bob Fisher's work on moral weights, it's very similar. So what we say is that, imagine there are one species, for instance, is defined by a minimum welfare level, which can be negative. Maybe it could be also only positive. Maximum welfare level, and then you have this welfare range. This is how much, the range in which the welfare of the animal can take values. Okay, and then imagine there is a second species, and the second species here is defined by having more extreme possibilities of welfare, both in negative and positive ranges. So what we want to do here is to capture these different ranges of welfare. Why? Because I showed you before, we standardized everything possibly, between 0 and 1 for 1 year of imperfect welfare. So we want to take it to weight that with what we call the welfare range or utility potentials, depending on how you see that. So far there is no good solution. I will present you the 2 main approaches that have been proposed. So the first approach is by Buldovson and Spears. So what Mark and Dean did was to propose a kind of a ratio, to say we will compute a ratio of the number of neurons on average, that an individual has in each species. So here it's and S is the number of neurons. Sorry, I said there was no equation. There's one. The number of neurons for species S divided by number of neurons for human and H. And you have some scaling parameter here. So there have been like many criticisms against this approach. I think most of them are valid. But so please look at research as something evolving. We start with something bad, and then we try to do something that's not that bad, but it takes time, So I think it was a very innovative approach and very interesting. The idea was that to experience, to have larger welfare ranges, it means that you can experience more emotions, more intense emotions, or more diverse emotions. And it comes with a cognitive cost, okay? So the higher cognitive skills, the more you're capable of interpreting information, maybe to have like different emotions, and then the bigger the kind of the set of emotions you can experience, the bigger your welfare range. So it was the basic idea. I also used that in one of my work, but I used cortical neurons instead. Anyway, one of the issues with that is, so they say, okay, maybe there is a positive correlation on average between number of neurons and welfare potential. We have many counterexamples, okay, many, including like some aquatic animals. Like, so, but let's assume for one moment that this form hold somehow. The issue is we don't know actually what's the welfare potential here. We're just trying to make estimates, and there is a scaling parameter. And what I show in one of my work is that you can have completely different conclusions based on this scaling parameter, which maybe only looks like a small technical term. But here, for instance, with this value, 1 year of life of human is equal to 2.9 years of life of baboons in terms of welfare potential. But you just go from 0.5 to 2, and then you have now 1 year of welfare for human is 67 years for a baboon. So huge differences, and here huge uncertainty. So somehow it's very bad, but that's one of the best methods we have available. The second method is, I'm sure you're familiar with that, is the moral rate project by Rethink and Bob. And what they did is to say, okay, this is my reading of it. If we're interested in the welfare range and the set of emotions that animals can experience, then we can directly look at scientific works and review the hedonic and cognitive capacities of animals, and then check what they're capable of. And at the end of the day, it gives us like some clues about how much welfare they can experience. What they did also is they used like not only one model for animal like welfare capacities, but also they investigate, I think, about 10 of them. So I think it's like outstanding work. Still, the question is how we can transform that into economics. And just to tell you, there are like huge discrepancies between the what we call the neuron counts on this approach. Yeah, for instance, I think it's not a small factor. Maybe it's a factor of 1,000. Between their scores and the scores with neurons. But just by the way, I mentioned one of our work here with Nicolas. Sorry, I don't have the graphs, but we computed a tax for intensive farming in France using the neuron counts. And even with the neuron counts, we have like large, tax levels. It's about like several. In some cases, it's more than 10 euros for 1 kilogram of chicken. So I would say we tend to think that if you use this approach, it's kind of a very lower, very conservative estimate of the taxes or that you should have with Bob's estimates, for instance. Okay, just to recap. I think there is a big question. I hope you don't feel like we don't have a good answer yet. I think recognizing there are many issues is part of research. There are a few questions I wrote here about all along the way, the questions I'm still asking myself. But this is the way we've seen so far: quantifying animal welfare, weighting it, and then integrating animal welfare in public decision making. I think we're getting closer, and from my experience with policymakers, they all know the quality framework for humans. So when you come and you say, hey, we have something very similar, which is quality, same properties, okay. They say, okay, I know it. I don't have to create a new framework and so on. So it's been very effective. Monetarization, they are good with that. Many people are, kind of lay people are kind of skeptical with putting value on human life. They're okay with that. They're used to that. Critical point I say here maybe is still this conversion factor. I was talking at the end where we need more work. Okay, I already told you that, but I think this is the first step towards like an equal consideration of equal interests. Many questions along the way, but I think if we don't have a quantification of interest, we will never be able to give equal consideration in trade-off situations, at least. Yeah, just try to be optimistic. I think it's slow, but it's getting better. We have like scores that now are similar to what we've been using for humans. We have also a better connection with models used in animal welfare science. ultimately, I think I hope we'll have an integrated model for that. But still, there are many sources of arbitrariness, biases, completely. I'm not sure we can solve all of it because we're always seeing the world with our own eyes. I'm not sure that at the end of the day it's possible to do something else. Even your neighbor, you're not capable really to know what's the Umwelt, what's the way of thinking and seeing the world of your neighbor. So then it's becoming even more difficult for animals, which are not from our species. We try to avoid also like speciesist assessment in the way we construct the methods. Still, it could be an issue, especially for the moral weights are presented at the end. But then there is also like more general question: does it make even sense to talk about those welfare range, utility potential? Yeah, and always the question is what's the alternative today? Yeah, last few things. I presented many works, but also like there are people like around me and in this field who are very important, but also in terms of interdisciplinarity. So Heather and Bob are in philosophy, but they've been contributing a lot to all those debates. Emilie is also interdisciplinary in France, and she's doing a great job on raising like animal welfare as a topic. Nicolas has been a co-author on many papers. Tom, my PhD student, and Antonin, we have a project together about, here it's about the moral cost of killing an animal. And then Raphael has been like very active in the field also and been using some of these tools. So thanks to them, and thanks to you.
Thank you. Now we will have the Q&A, as promised. We have some good questions from the audience. So yeah, let's go from the top. Today morning, we heard a talk about Welfare Footprint Project, which proposes another metric for quantifying animal welfare, namely cumulative time in pain, with distinction to like 4 different levels of pain. What are your views on this metric, and how does it compare to your method based on 5 freedoms and also to the other method that you presented?
Okay, thank you. I've been asked this question a lot. I should have prepared like some slides. So I start by the end. Let's forget the 5 freedom. I used that before, but now I'm like fully on board for the 5 domains. So I would say it's very 2 different perspectives. I would encourage you to see our approach as a top-down. Like we have existing frameworks. We have like specific axiomatic assumptions at the theoretical level about how to construct indicators and so on, and for humans. And then we try to adopt that for animals and to go all the way to the ground. So kind of top-down approach. I think approaches are like the Welfare Footprint Project do exactly the contrary. They have like very good knowledge about animal welfare, but also like biological like things associated with that, how you can quantify that, so on, and they try to build from the bottom. I would say maybe we lack here knowledge about how to implement what we've been developing on the field. But I think the property they lack is how to integrate that at the end of the day into the existing frameworks. So my thing is that imagine you're going to a policymaker tomorrow. The policymaker know how to value human welfare in monetary units or in QALYs. And you're saying, okay, here I have my measure of animal welfare, but it's in a number of minutes of intensive pain. I mean, they've never used that. So they can always say, okay, I will take that into account, but let's be honest. When you have one equation where you express everything and you have another topic saying, hey, this is important. So that's why I started the talk like that. So I think it's a very different perspective. I hope that one day we're able to merge the 2 approaches. But I was talking about greenhouse gas emissions because I think, so we can say that 200 like euros for 1 ton of carbon is way too low, but still it's way better than nothing. And I think they won this game because they were able, to use the existing framework and to put monetary units in that. That's my thing. There might be different views, but so I would say like a short answer, different approaches. I hope they will be complementary in the long run, and we are maybe focusing on different things. Yeah.
What if considering the welfare of some farmed animals decreases overall animal welfare? For example, considering the welfare of cows could result in people replacing beef with chicken meat and fish, thus making the welfare of farmed animals worse.
Oh yeah, great question. I don't know how number of votes this question get, but I really like it. So so I think what we try to do here also is to have a tool that evaluates animal welfare at the individual level. So note that, for instance, the current existing frameworks is more like a welfare quality. In Europe, we use to assess the welfare in farms. It's at a collective level. Here, we try to have something at the end of the individual level of the animal. Which can be used to capture all types of trade-offs. So what we did in one of our work about meat taxation is we simulated the introduction of a methane tax in France, and we showed indeed that there was a decrease in beef consumption, then an increase in pork and poultry consumption, and then at the end of the day it was bad for animal welfare. But you could also say, for instance, if you go from intensive farming to extensive farming, but you don't reduce meat consumption, then you will need more lands, possibly destroying other sources of biodiversity with natural habitats and so on. So then the question we all know is what's the welfare of the animals in those areas, blah, blah, blah. So it's a never-ending problem, but I think if we are able to value the welfare of animals at the individual level, we will be able to talk about that. Last point, but which is also difficult, is that when you replace beef with chicken, it's not the same life. So in one case, there is one individual that lives. In the other case, it's another one. So there are like tricky questions also here in terms of population ethics.
Yeah. Can you say more about the work with policymakers so far? What was the context for talking about quantifying animal welfare with them?
Thanks. So experience with French and US authorities about that. I think in France, they were mostly like interested in following what's going on and not very proactive. In the US, there was, so Bob Fisher also like kind of co-piloted initiative with some people on board at the USDA. And the long run objective was to really develop what's the best methods today to evaluate animal welfare and to make it in benefit cost analysis, because they're reviewing cases where animal welfare is at stage. Okay. I would say, sadly, it's been collateral damage by Trump access to power. I mean, I think a lot of people have been fired at the USDA, a complete change in teams. And you know, animal welfare is a bit of there's also animal welfare washing from Trump's team. For instance, I don't know if you heard about that. They decided to stop funding, to reduce funding for animal testing. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, of course, they don't want you to talk about animal farming. So so sadly now it has stopped. My hope is just that we keep working until somehow in the US it gets better. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just last point, I think even for Europe, there was this initiative, End Cage Farming. There's been a preliminary assessment report by the European Union. And here they were just using, willingness to pay for free-range eggs. So because they don't have the methods also. So I think if we don't make it like at the academic level, they will never use that directly. So yeah, we're trying to work on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for the next question, I think you've touched upon this, but maybe if you want to elaborate, what do you think are the most promising paths of including an animal welfare metric into legislation or intergovernmental commitments and so on, like we do for carbon footprint?
That's a good question. I think one reason of the success for climate change, I mean for pricing carbon emissions, was also the IPCC work, because they managed to have like high leading scholars from all over the world to meet and to produce a report about the state of climate change. I think it would be the first step for me would be to have the same type of academic like prestige, but also like kind of report, like maybe not yearly, but every 4 years about the state of animal welfare in the world, where but I mean somehow you need like enough people interested in the field. I think there are, but you need a lot of coordination, and because so far it's not here, so you need a lot of team building as well. Yeah, for me it's like the big initiative like that we need. But there are also many technical tools and questions we haven't addressed yet. So, for instance, all policymakers, I think they all agree now up to presented the quality-like scores and so on. They really like it. The conversion metrics here, the conversion ratio is still an issue that makes it difficult. I would not try to convince policymakers tomorrow because I know it's a wall for them. Yeah.
You've talked about including positive welfare as part of a metric. Do you think that it creates a risk that it will give an excuse for farmers to offset, in a way, serious welfare violations with minor gestures of creating small positive experiences for animals?
So thank you. Also a good question. So if your metrics is good, then you should be able to compensate with something that has exactly the same impact. Okay. So compensation can be good if there is no other solution. For instance, if I take your phone and I break it, you are compensated, and hopefully, you're indifferent at the end of the day. So maybe it's good. I don't see it as a problem, especially because if you do something very small, basically you will never be able to compensate for the suffering that a broiler is experiencing in the intensive farm. I think it's not possible. But imagine you focus only on negative welfare. So what you have is that, imagine you're below 0. Okay, 0 is indifference to death. Then you will only be at minus 0.5, and then you only capture variations between 0 and 0.5. But if you put your bar higher, if you say that if you bring an animal to existence, its level of welfare should be at least 0.5, then the cost, of having an animal in a bad state becomes much larger. So because you're setting the bar higher, you said the bar, my baseline is not just the animal basically surviving in terms of needs. The bar is the animal having a good life because you're bringing it. So if we don't focus on positive welfare, we lose, I think, half of the problem.
Yeah. So basically, it's the responsibility of the metric to be good enough to not allow fake offsetting.
That's for the compensation part, true. Yeah. But also, I think also if we focus only on pain, our baseline is no pain. If we focus on no pain and some happiness in the animal's life, this is the new benchmark. Then intensive farming, you would say it's even worse. Yeah.
Can you give one practical example of calculating equally? How did you use it in legislative process, reforms, interventions? Okay,
thanks. I should have put that also on slides. So for Aquali, the examples we've done were about imagine you're working in a school canteen, and then you're serving today chicken from an intensive farm, and you decide to get better, and then you're looking for close by farms will have outdoor access, or maybe it's indoor farming without cages and so on. So you have different opportunities. Then the question is, what's the most effective for you? So maybe for indoor farming, it's a bit more costly, but the welfare improvement is limited. If you go for outdoor farming, then the increase is better, but then it's much more costly. So basically, you want to know how many to have this effectiveness analysis. What's the best thing to do? There are tricky things along the way. For instance, in the most intensive farmings, the duration of your life is different from the outdoor farming. So these are tricky questions, but all of that we can answer with Aquali. So we have your average welfare, the average welfare of animal in the farm. Okay, then we multiply that by the welfare reduction, and then we obtain a final score. I don't have my slides here anymore, although I would have shown you something maybe. Yeah, it's something very easy to do once you have the results. Yeah, we have that in our paper. Let's say you start at 1, and then I say if you have a poor welfare at this level in nutrition, then your score will be minus 0.3. So you take 1 minus 0.3. Then if you have like also...
You have your slides back.
Sorry. Okay. Great. Maybe you can show this one. Okay. So here, we have 4 physical domains in Aquali. So here it's the perfect welfare. You have a score of 1 if you have the welfare, perfect welfare on 4 dimensions. And then this is the welfare levels each time in 4 dimensions. So here, for instance, you have the score when the animal has natural experiences only on 4 dimensions. So when you have the experts or when you have you say, okay, when I look at nutrition, on average, positive and negative experiences compensate, so it's natural, and so on. So for the 4 domains, health, nutrition, environment, and behavioral interactions. So it's very easy. You can compute that for everything. We have the scores. You can send me an email. We have also like some code to do that. I have like a Google Sheet file if you want. I can share. Very easy. What's a good property with that is that it's also additive, so you can add 1 year in perfect welfare or in lower welfare, and that you always get the scores. There are issues with that, but that's what they use for humans, so we use exactly the same framework. Sorry for not being able to answer more about that.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are on time, which happens also to be time for lunch. If you have any more questions to Romain, please just interrupt him during the conference, talk to him with your questions. Thank you once again for the fantastic talk, and yeah.
Thank you.